there was an unequal bargaining position between the digital platforms and our traditional news businesses. That review also found that they were operating in a highly concentrated market, a market that today sees for every $100 of online advertising spend, $53 goes to Google, $28 goes to Facebook, and $19 goes to other participants. And as a result of this concentrated market, these digital platforms were unavoidable trading partners for traditional news media businesses. The recommendation of the ACCC was that the government put in place a bargaining code between the parties, a voluntary bargaining code. And the government accepted that recommendation, and Paul, the Prime Minister, and I announced that that was our policy position. But it soon became apparent that a voluntary code wouldn't cut it. That because of the unequal bargaining position between the traditional news media businesses and the digital platforms, that deals could not be struck that would see the digital platforms pay for original journalistic content. So the government earlier this year announced our intent to proceed with a mandatory bargaining code. And tomorrow I'll introduce into the Parliament legislation that will give effect to that mandatory bargaining code. A framework that will allow and enable commercial deals to be struck between the digital platforms and the media businesses outside the code. It's really important to understand that. Paul and I and the Prime Minister, we want deals to be struck between the parties outside of the code. Commercial negotiations that are conducted in good faith, we want those deals to be struck outside of the code. And the word coming back to us is that there are deals that may be struck very soon between the parties. But if the digital platforms and the news media businesses are unable to reach a commercial agreement or unwilling to reach a commercial agreement, then a final offer arbitration model will take effect. And this final offer arbitration model will allow for what is called two-way value exchange. The money can only go one way. The money can only go from the digital platforms to the traditional news media businesses. But the arbiters need to take into account the benefits that traditional news media businesses get by having eyeballs on their product when they appear on Google or Facebook. The third thing that this legislative framework will do will set a series of minimum standards that the digital platforms have to adhere to. This is a huge reform. This is a huge reform. This is a world first. And the world is watching what happens here in Australia. But our legislation, which will be introduced in the Parliament tomorrow and then go to a committee, a Senate committee, our legislation will help ensure that the rules of the digital world mirror the rules of the physical world. That's been our intention all along, to ensure that the rules of the digital world mirror the rules of the physical world, and ultimately to sustain our media landscape here in Australia.